back, everybody, to the Laugh Cry Club. I'm Joy.
I'm Rebecca.
This is episode 101. We
101.
just hit our 100.
Woo!
That was really fun. Thank you, everybody, for celebrating with us and being here for over 100 episodes now. It feels really, really good. As promised, last week we alluded to covering a true crime story. And I always struggle with talking about this because, as Rebecca and I stated last week, we are both very interested in the profession of criminal justice. We both have worked in criminal justice. So this is not like this outside looking in fascination, a little bit, but because we're psychologists and because we work in the mental health field, we have over 20 years of experience. If you're new to the show, we are more interested in the dynamics of people. So whenever I'm watching true crime, and this is not to kind of like, I think it's more of just a disclaimer for myself because I feel so delicate of even talking about stories like this because they are consumed so easily for entertainment when at the end of the day, people's lives were devastated and families lived through hell and still live through hell because of these tragedies. So I just want to say that up front that the goal of talking about this really is from an educational standpoint around psychology and the dynamics that we observe when we are watching these stories. And that's truly why I am interested in it. I've always been, I remember from, like right after high school when I entered college is when I really got into John Douglas, who was the head FBI profiler, who kind of like really pioneered FBI profiling and was responsible for capturing many of the serial killers. So I read almost every John Douglas book. I applied to an internship for the FBI. I was living in France at the time, so I couldn't like actually apply because you had to like, be there in person to apply at the time.
Were you in high school at that point or college?
No, I was in college.
Okay.
I was probably like in my second year in college.
Joy, this is so cool because I did not know about this part for you because when I was in high school, if anybody asked me what I wanted to be an FBI agent.
Oh yeah. See, like we are so similar. Yeah, we're so similar.
I love it.
We are the same person. I really think that it's a lot of why we like the same things.
Yeah.
And I just want to keep saying this because I just feel my heart is really soft and tender for these, the victims of all of these situations is that I truly, from a young age, when I was trying to figure out what to do in college was like, I'm so interested in why people do what they do. It was so interesting to me to read about John Douglas and how that profession in and of itself was very interesting to me. Like I said, I was like, for a long time, really wanted to go in the FBI. I was like, that would be so cool. And I was really bummed when I couldn't do the internship. But at the same time, I was like, well, I'm studying abroad in France and I can't give that up either. So I was in a great situation, but it was like a hard choice. So, and then for a while thought I might go into becoming a lawyer and study criminal justice. But at the time, my major was psychology and I just didn't want to change it. So anyway, so just to kind of give some background, and as Rebecca stated, you were on the same boat in terms of your interest. And the reason we got into psychology, and I still have a passion for criminal justice, preventing things. And I think that's why I chose to go the therapy route and become a therapist rather than go into law enforcement. And I may have mentioned this before, but I went on a ride along when I was in college because I was really struggling with the idea of like, okay, should I change my major or should I stay with psychology? Changing your major is, could be a big deal. It could really tack on some time if you're, if you have to do more credit. So I was really interested in figuring this out. And so I went on a ride along, and I remember the ride along really made me sad because it was all the aftermath. It was like people who got into trouble and the devastation after the fact. And I was like, I don't know if I could do this every day. I want to try to work on prevention and help people who are struggling before they get to a point where there's like a devastation. What led me into doing therapy and helping people on that side, and worked in juvenile justice for 11 years. And so I know a lot about the criminal justice system. So anyway, all that to say, do you want to add anything to just around like your perspective of this?
Yeah, I would say, I agree with everything you're saying. For me, I actually had a career in criminal justice. My undergrad was CJ. You
got a master's degree.
Yeah, I have a master's degree in criminal justice. So, I worked in corrections field for a while. I worked with adults and juveniles. I worked with a lot of sex offenders. That's part of that. But I agree. I left the profession because I felt like I couldn't help people because the system's not set up to help people. It's to punish people, right?
Yes.
And there's not resources for rehabilitation or when people get out, like, how do we help people be successful. So yeah, then I went back and got a master's in social work. So, but yeah, really passionate about the field of criminal justice. And I love that you have that connection too. And so we're just not like, I feel like we're not completely outsiders to it because we do have some knowledge of the system, right?
Yeah.
But we also have
worked
this
in it for quite some time.
Yeah, we also have this perspective of human behavior, trying to understand why people do certain things.
Right.
And then,
why people do what they do.
and then what's, the victims left and the things they're going through emotionally. It is very fascinating. It's also very sad and troubling at times. I think it really boils down to human behavior. And people want to understand human behavior because a lot of times we're trying to prevent something from happening, right?
We want to try to prevent
Keep people
it.
safe.
Keep people safe.
Yeah.
Try to get to kind of solving the puzzle, if you will, of like, okay, why did this happen so I can make sure that I am protected? And because we've talked about this before, our brains are always looking for how to keep us safe. I think that is a very big piece of why people watch documentaries, why people watch true crime, listen to true crime podcasts. Yeah, I really have a deep understanding of it from many levels. So today we want to talk about, we mentioned this last week, there's a documentary that, and I watch a lot of documentaries, I read a lot of biographies. I really am interested just across the board in people's lives. So whenever there's a story that's real, I will watch it. True crime or not true crime, right?
I do too. I don't like to read nonfiction, or actually, I don't like to read fiction. I always
Fiction,
read
yeah.
biographies.
I read biographies, I read memoirs, I read autobiographies.
Because I want to know about the people's lives.
Yes. Yeah. What's your favorite biography? Do you have a favorite?
I don't know that I have
I'll name
a
you like
favorite.
top two that I like.
Okay, tell me what your
constantly go
top two
back
are.
to. One that continues to stick out in my mind. One of my favorites is Scar Tissue. Anthony Kiedis, the Red Hot Chili Peppers guy. His story is so. Oh gosh, it's so good, but it's so sad, and it also makes me really. I feel sad because I think he will always be an addict. I am amazed at how he's still alive. Like, he's one of those people where you're like, how are you still alive with all the struggle you went through with drug addiction? But the story itself is just really, really well done. And then the other one that I read at least once a year because it's just such an amazing story is Know My Name by Chanel Miller. It is about, she was brutally raped and attacked at a frat party, went through this like insane trial because she doesn't remember a lot because she was intoxicated. It's this, the writing is like, and she reads it if you listen to the audiobook.
Okay.
And her voice is really beautiful and her writing is like incredible. So the combination of like how she tells her story, it is so heartbreaking, but so beautifully done. And for the longest time, she was a Jane Doe, and then she decided to, let her name be known. And that's why she wrote this book, Know My Name. That's another good one. But I am all about the biographies and memoirs and how, like, what makes people tick. So, okay. So let's start with just a brief overview of this documentary. If you have not seen the documentary, there will be spoilers. But you might not want to listen to this episode if you do not want spoilers, because we're going to tell everything about what happens in this documentary. I just want to acknowledge, first and foremost, the victims of this tragedy, which is Dom Russo and Davion Flanagan. And they were people, their families, their futures were completely ripped away from them. We just want to honor them and honor their families. And this conversation again is about accountability and what it costs too when people ignore these signs, either don't seek help and or ignore red flags, specifically Mackenzie's family. So there's a trio of recent high school graduates, Mackenzie, Dom, and Davion, and they were leaving a party and Kenzie was driving. Kenzie, just as this documentary kind of develops her character, if you will, is she's really had this online persona of like a TikTok influencer building a brand, kind of a mean girl dynamic. Like, I tried to think of myself in high school. Like, I would not be friends with someone like her in high school. She was just very like...
would hurt my my feelings would be so hurt. I was
so hurt
super sensitive. Yeah.
Yeah. There were a couple people in this documentary that I was a little bit annoyed by just as a viewer, that I was like, they really painted her as like, no, she was really nice to me. I'm like, well, just because she was nice to you does not mean she was a nice person. And I'll get to that in a minute. But my hunch is she was nice to you because she was gaining something from you. She was kind of if you're looking at it from like Mean Girls movie lingo, she was like a queen bee. And her social media was like very in your face. She had, always posting her outfits. She smoked pot all the time. Just kind of like one of those like flashy, I don't give an F about you kind of attitude was kind of her, like the way that she spoke often is like, you get the vibe. Her parents are in this documentary, and right out of the gate, you kind of feel compassion towards everyone in this movie. At the beginning, you're like, wow, her parents are really sad about this. They kind of open with like the actual crash, which is, like I said before, these three friends were leaving a party. It was like really early in the morning. All of a sudden, this car just like barrels 100 miles an hour into a building.
Yeah. With no braking.
No brakes.
No steering, turning
The car
away.
busts in half. A jogger running by sees it, calls the police. The police show up. Mackenzie's still breathing. The other two have sadly passed away from this horrible accident. So it really shocks the community, rocks the community. Kenzie's in the hospital for a long time. She has extensive injuries, as you can imagine. Then the story starts to unfold. Of course, everyone's like in reaction mode of like, oh my gosh, what happened? This tragedy. Oh my gosh, we're grieving. We lost these two beautiful humans. Then they're like, but what happened? So all of these things start to come out of like the footage of this video is like barreling 100 miles an hour with no brakes. Like, what happened here? The long and short of it here is like they're really kind of analyzing Mackenzie's behaviors and the volatile relationship that appeared to be between her and her boyfriend Dom, as she was dating Dom. Davion, unfortunately, was just like a very, well, they all were just like in this like horrible accident, but Davion was like kind of like a last minute got in the car with them. So I think there's just like an added layer of like, ugh, like why, I'm sure, and this family is just so sweet and so lovely that they struggle with that of like, if only he would have just like stayed behind. But Dom and Kenzie were dating for quite some time. They were living together, and there's stories that come out of like Mackenzie and him having a volatile relationship, getting in fights all the time. So then you kind of like unravel this with like all the parents talking, where all of a sudden they realize like, okay, Mackenzie might actually be not so innocent here. And I think what the part that is concerning is the parents start to seem to me as what I would call enabling. What was your first impression as you're seeing these parents, Mackenzie's parents, talking about this?
They still believe she's innocent, that it wasn't intentional, the accident, which late, in court, she was found guilty. She's serving 2 consecutive life sentences right now, and I think she's up parole in maybe 15 years or whatnot. But I feel like they're maintaining her innocence, and even in this documentary, they have like the victim impact statements, at the end they show, because some of the hearing, her mom gets up to read a statement from their family. I think that's so basically for the sentencing, like, hey, judge, please take it easy on my kid, which I think a lot of parents would do. I mean, I think she was 17 at the time this happened. So 17-year-olds. But the statement that she read I was mind blown. It was so disconnected from what's really going on and the things she was saying that I'm like, it was so not considerate of other people.
Right.
Like the victims' families that are in this courtroom. And the judge essentially became extremely offended by it. Was like, whoa, like.
Yeah. The judge was not putting up with any of it.
Oh, the judge was pissed. Like, you can't come in here and say like this, like it was ridiculous. But they're really interesting. But yeah, they maintain her innocence. And I feel like they probably were enabling the behavior. I saw an interview recently with the dad on TMZ. And he was basically saying like, well, I can't control my kid. It was like about marijuana smoking, right? The marijuana, like I've said, don't do these things. These things are bad to do, but I can't stop my kid from doing it. It was almost like a hands up, like, oh my gosh, what do I do?
Shrug emoji. Yeah.
And I think maybe, but there are plenty of things that you can do. And so like, I think they probably feel like they're victims of this as well. And they really are.
They really are.
Yeah.
And I think there's 5 million sides to every story. And the truth, what I learned from working at the DA's office is like there's 5 million stories. Everyone has a different version of the story, and the truth always lands somewhere in the middle.
It sure does.
And I always think about that. So
yep.
Interesting piece was friends who are interviewed for this documentary saying things like her parents just made excuses for her. They got her out of any trouble that she was getting into. And I just want to kind of point out from the psychology perspective of pathological entitlement. It's the belief that rules, consequences, accountability apply to other people, but not to you. Now, were they doing this intentionally? I don't think so. However, I think this was baked into their family dynamic. Entitlement develops in childhood and adolescence by the role of like permissive versus neglectful versus enmeshed parenting. So the difference between like building confidence in a child versus shielding them from all the discomfort and consequences is what I think probably played a role here, because you want to build confidence by letting them make mistakes and being like, you know, I think of my brother when we were kids and he stole a rock from the zoo gift shop, or like a fool's gold rock. Right?
Okay,
he put it in his pocket.
Yep.
And when we got home, my mom was like, "Where did you get that?" And he was like, "Oh, I just took it from the store." And she was like, we were marching right back to that store. We drove all the way back to Phoenix. We lived in Mesa, which is about a 40 minutes drive.
Oh my gosh.
We drove all the way back to Phoenix, the Phoenix Zoo, to go to the gift shop.
To return the rock.
To return the rock and say, we did not mean to take this. You say you're sorry. Like, that is accountability.
That is.
Versus, whoopsie, don't steal, haha. So that's the difference between like you build confidence in a child by letting them make these mistakes. And it was very clear to me. They saw it as, but she didn't do anything wrong. Here's where I think it's a slippery slope. My impression from, again, this is a documentary. I don't have the 100% facts, is that their view, the parents' view of Mackenzie's parents' view was, we believe our daughter. We believe our daughter. So we're going to support everything that she says. I mean, is that horrible? No, but it is when you are trying to teach someone how to be accountable.
Yeah.
And say, hey, Mackenzie, you might see it this way, but how do you think the other person felt? And what I think was missing from this entire dynamic in Mackenzie's family is, how would other people feel in this situation versus like, well, we just believe our daughter. And I think it's like the road to hell is paved with good intentions. Their intentions were good, of like, we love our daughter. We're going to put everything into her and we want to believe her. And I think that like kind of goes into what we call enmeshed parenting, which is like, there is no separation between daughter as an individual and parents as individual. They are, I'll do a visual when I like do the video, but if you just clasp your hands together, you're doing, prayer hands. And that's how I describe enmeshed parenting. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I definitely think there's enmeshment there. And they do it, like you were talking about, to protect their child, right? Because they want to make sure, like, shield her from harm. When you're enmeshed, then it's like, if my kid has to take responsibility for something, then I have to do that too. And that becomes really uncomfortable. And so it's almost like you get really insular and protects the family unit from like feeling any harm. And it just, of course, we weren't there for the parenting, but it just, from what we've seen, it appears there's been a real disservice. And, I go back to also that she was 17 when she did this, right? And there's a lot of conversations about her behavior, like after this crash, right? We saw all the stuff that she did prior, like all the social media content, was really into fashion. I think her boyfriend at that point was maybe doing some cryptocurrency type stuff. So there was some money involved, and he was probably, helping her because they were even living together. But, that's the other point. Like, they were allowing her to live with him. And she was in her senior year of high school, right? When they were living together. She hadn't graduated yet. So I know some parents allow that to happen, but that always makes me kind of do a head tilt. Like,
I mean, I'm sorry. I would never.
You're 17.
You're 17, for crying out loud. And so that to me,
maybe even 16 at one point, when you're like,
so
you're not an adult. You can't make good decisions.
You can't make decisions, but they are empowering her to make decisions. They're empowering her, which is fine, but they are trusting her as an adult when she is literally a child.
Well, and her brain is not developed like an adult. Like, so you can't.
And she's smoking pot every single day.
Every single day, and a lot of it. Like, I saw some of the joints, and I'm like, where do they even get a joint that big? Like, serious. It was so ridiculous.
All of these combinations are very dangerous in terms of when someone is not being held accountable to consider others in the decisions that they're making. You know, they have social media. She has this presence on social media that is boosting her up as this like big ego is kind of what comes across. And like, it can reinforce the sense that like one's feelings and image are way more important than the impact they have on other people. So it's like the impact that she has is way more important. Then there's this volatility between the relationship of Kenzie and Dom. We hear calls in the documentary of like possessiveness, threats, fights that they got into, her inability to tolerate any rejection. Like if there was any hint of them breaking up, she was like, no. And I guess there was like at some point a threat to drive them into an accident because he was threatening to break up with her.
It was highly emotional and volatile.
Yeah.
Very high.
Very, very much so.
There wasn't a lot of emotional regulation on her part, it seemed. And I also would say, and I'm not defending her, but I'm thinking as a 17-year-old, when you already have been allowed to live on your own, you have parents trusting you to make adult decisions at 17, you don't have the emotional EQ. You don't have the EQ to operate as an adult. Like, it's impossible. Your brain is not developed. And so...
Yeah. It's quite literally impossible.
I mean, if you think of any teen, 17-year-old, 16-year-old, they can be impulsive. They can not maintain, they can, like not regulate emotions. I think people know the difference between right or wrong, but they don't, the prefrontal cortex is not completely developed to be like, I need to make the absolute right decision for myself and everybody else.
Right. You lack some of that deep insight as well.
Yeah.
So I think that, here we have enabling where the parents are, the parents are doing it because to them it felt like love, but it's not. Like trusting our daughter and treating her as an adult because she's a smart kid. It's like, that's fine and all. They ignored some serious red flags and passed it off as like, we're just supporting our daughter. And then the enmeshment piece is when a parent can't separate their own identity and their ego from their child. And so the child's wrongdoing becomes a personal attack on them. So they can't sit there, and that's probably why any wrongdoing that she did at school or whatever trouble that she was getting into at school, they were like, our daughter? Because that is a reflection of them versus our daughter makes her own decisions. We are going to hold her accountable and have her learn some lessons here. And so that enmeshment is really, really apparent in this documentary, at least from a psychological perspective.
Yeah.
That stood out to me right away. And then the externalization of blame, which really was, this is what you're talking about with the impact statement that each person was able to make in court. The family system, and we use this a lot in therapy. We talk about like family systems. It's basically, if you think of like a game where every piece on the play board or on the game board is like how the system works, how the game is played in your own family. A family system, this is the dynamic that they have established within their family, is like accountability is always someone else's problem. That's kind of like the family unspoken rule. They don't know they're doing it, but they're doing it. And the school's the problem. Oh my gosh, this other girl's the problem. The Russos are the problem. The justice system is the problem. It's this externalization of blame. And I think that's what really bothers me about this family and was very, very, very clear to me. They couldn't just like let it be what it was and be like, she messed up.
They continue to go back to, they will be like, yes, she was driving the car, but it was an accident, right?
Right. It's like they can't just
It's an accident.
They can't entertain the possibility that not my daughter, but I would imagine this is a very scary time for them.
Yeah.
At the same time, I would be like, look, if you did something bad, you got to own up to the consequences. But they went into savior mode because, again, they cannot separate their ego from their daughter. Right. The guilty sentencing and all of the verdict of Mackenzie is them being guilty.
Yep, them being sentenced, yeah.
And what that looks like for them. It reminds me very much, did you watch the Gabby Petito documentary?
Oh, yes.
And everyone knows about that story, that very, very sad story.
That is so sad.
Gabby's...
That's a whole nother thing to
That's
unpack.
A whole nother thing.
Oh my gosh.
Domestic violence and coercive control. The family of Brian Laundrie reminds me very much of Mackenzie and her family. How enabling they were to Brian after he murdered Gabby and protected him and hid him.
Yeah.
When they knew what happened, it's like...
And there's family members trying to reach out to them to say, we can't find our daughter.
We can't find our daughter.
And
Like, in what world would your family, if I had, first of all, if something like that, if in some like weird universe, flipped up universe, I was to call my family and say, I killed someone, I got to come home and hide, they would be like, the fuck you're coming home? We were driving your ass straight to the police department.
Right. They're not going to hide you.
I mean, they would probably murder me before. Yeah. I want to stress here that is how powerful enmeshment can be, and how people just cannot tolerate separating themselves from their family dynamic. It runs so deep. This is where generational trauma comes in, where the river runs deep, man. So it is hard to change these dynamics, and just simply being aware of them is not going to change anything. People got to do a lot of hard work. Point of us kind of bringing these themes up is that it runs so deep. And if this is a dynamic maybe you're experiencing in your family, this is okay to talk about and maybe get therapy around, to say, man, I'm really having a hard time like separating myself from my child. My ego is so wrapped up in what they do. I want you to understand, like, it's very common, so please don't feel shame around that, but it is also really detrimental to your relationship. And quite frankly, in therapy, enmeshment is really hard to untangle. So like, the sooner you can kind of recognize it and work on it, the better. It is really hard. Like, I treat family members who, for example, like maybe a daughter who's enmeshed with, like, they have a meshed relationship with their mom. It is so hard for the daughter to find that independence, because they're like, I just can't like get away from it. It feels like you're just covered in slime all the time.
Yeah. It's so fascinating. Like, what do you say about, this situation where people are like, well, it's a different, like, if somebody said this to you, like, hey, it's a different time period. And yes, we do know that our kid did the thing. They were the driver. This bad thing happened. This terrible thing happened. But we also live in the world of everybody sues everybody. And so we want to go insular and protect the family unit and protect our own financial well-being, because the family has to continue, right? What do you say about that? Or do you think that's part of it at all?
What do you mean? Like
where families start to be like the hiding out of somebody, or the, hey, we don't believe they did it. Is that really what they believe? Or are they just saying that and made themselves believe it because they feel like they have to protect the family unit? Because
I think it's a little bit of everything. Yeah. But I think it's like a narcissistic family system.
Yep. Yeah.
Where
that's it.
It's just like, this is not, and I don't say that lightly, like, it's an actual thing. Like, it's a framework for how shame gets redirected outward, then processed inward.
Yeah.
And that's where I think it's really dangerous. And it's really important to understand that, because we're not saying this in like the TikTok culture way, but truly these family systems can be really destructive and toxic at all costs. I had a mentor back in the day when I was a fairly brand new therapist, and I always think about this as like, nobody wants to upset the apple cart. When we have a family system in place, boy, oh boy, do we love to keep that apple cart like right up and upright and going straight forward, and please don't upset the apple cart.
Well, a lot of times it's a sense of survival for some of the members, right? You keep it going because it's like, I don't want to be the one that upsets it, because
exactly. Because then you got to unravel it, and then everyone has to deal with their shit. It's the same thing when there's an addict in the family.
Yeah.
People will enable, and people will be codependent, and people will keep an addict living in their house using, and be like, well, if I let him on the street, he'll die. And it's like the hard rock and a hard place that we get into is like, well, if you keep them using in your house, they will also die.
Right.
So the hard part is like, we don't want to upset this apple cart, because then we're going to have to deal with A, B, and C. And the hard truth is, you are going to have to deal with hard things. But keeping the dynamic, like, let's take the Laundrie family, for example. What on earth did they think was going to happen? That it was just going to blow over, And so I think that, like,
I don't think they probably were thinking that far ahead.
No,
right?
They weren't thinking that far ahead.
It's like survival mode.
It's like you get into the survival mode and you lose touch with reality. But I don't
really
think,
do.
Because you're not really thinking about the bigger picture, because you're so honed in on this family dynamic that it's almost impossible to see things from an objective standpoint. Let's kind of talk really quickly, and as we wrap up here, what were the parts of that family dynamic that were like the hardest for you to watch?
Oh, good question. I feel like the hardest part is the mom. The mom and her relationship is the hardest for me because I feel like those two are super enmeshed. I think dad is too, but there's some, mom and her are very enmeshed with each other. I think the mom over identifies with her as almost like this is me, and like, look how great I can be. We're parents like kids that are really athletic, and then they just kind of keep pushing them in that way. Like, maybe that you want to be that, but you couldn't be that super athlete. Maybe this mom couldn't be this, maybe I think mom has some probably low self-esteem.
Well, and I also want to call out that like generational trauma here. My hunch is the same thing happened with her mom.
Oh my gosh, there's so much trauma in this family. There really is. Also, when I was telling you before we started recording, I learned that Mackenzie actually has a sister, which if you watch the documentary, there's no mention of the sister, which maybe protecting her.
Right.
But it felt like I was like, wow. And the things I were seeing from Mackenzie's social media and the way the parents were talking, I'm like, oh, this is maybe an only child. And sometimes when you have an only child and two parents, there is more enmeshment there, but there's another sister. And so I'm like, wow, there's definitely some trauma in this family. It's almost like the sister's been forgotten somehow because all the focus has been on Mackenzie for whatever.
Yeah. And I can also appreciate if the sister was like, I want nothing to do with this documentary.
Probably.
I want to be completely out of this and I want to live my own life. Like, I could also see that. I could completely understand too, especially with all the controversy around the family.
Yeah.
But I agree with you. I think the hardest part was, it felt like when I was watching the mom and dad, there was a vibe that I got that I didn't get with any of the other families, that they were almost like attached at the hip. Everything that dad said, mom, you know what I mean? Like, there was no separation if we're talking about enmeshed.
Like, nobody had their
families.
own opinion.
No one had their own opinions. It was one opinion where, like, the Russo family, for example, I could tell it was like they were very different. They were very like, even the way they sat was like a little bit farther apart, where Mackenzie's mom and dad were like shoulder to shoulder. I don't know what the message around this was, but even the dad had a t-shirt on that said boom on the front. Like, I
saw that. I'm
that
like,
choice was very weird, where I'm like, read the room. That's another thing where it's like,
they can't read the room.
They can't read the room.
No.
And they're incapable of it. So it's like, as therapists, we have to be like, we're not here to like judge you, but you simply don't have the tools to read the room. So my hope is that they obtain tools to develop empathy, to develop that perspective of thinking outside myself versus my ego is going to be too wounded if I do that. It's too painful to look at what other people might be feeling. So that was really hard. And then I still think about like how the impact statement she made around not wanting her daughter to have like, a harsh sentence. And she said something about like, Davion, we didn't really know him as well.
So it's like,
and the judge was like, so does that not matter that he died? And I mean, it's just like, it's like, how on earth, and that again, it tells me volumes, the lack of awareness, that a lack of EQ that you have, that you are sitting in a room with victims who lost their child, and this is what you choose to say. That to me says volumes. And I think that's what that judge saw probably way more than we did, because they sat through the entire trial. And I'm sure the judge was like, saw that from 5 million miles away and was like, I see exactly what's happened here. The hard part is like, I think the family still is like, we're fighting for justice for Mackenzie. And at the end of the day, it's a very classic situation of, girl, you made your bed, you got to lay in it. That is like where the parents went wrong. Mm-hmm. And I worked a lot in juvenile justice, as I've said before, where it's like, well, should the parents be held accountable? Yes, they should be accountable, because it is your child. You are the one to care for them, to make them responsible human beings. However, you need to teach them right and wrong here. Mm-hmm. I do believe that you are fully responsible for their behaviors until they are adults and can show that they can be a responsible citizen.
No, I agree. I feel like, more in the past too, I feel like parents took that more or took it more serious than and I'm not trying to group all parents, but I've just seen some things. And when kids get in trouble for certain things, I feel like parents kind of get this like really protective of them, which I get, but it's kind of like, but let's also point fingers at this other person. I feel like maybe our generation of parents were like, if you do something wrong, you're going to be in big trouble for it. And they recognize that they were responsible. Like, they could go to jail for doing something. I think parents today are like, it's not my problem. I didn't do it. But it's like, this is your child. Yeah. You are responsible for them. Even like if you have kids over at your house, you're responsible for all those kids.
Right. Exactly.
It's like, you can't get to say like, well, I don't know. I wasn't, blah, blah, blah. It's your responsibility. I don't know if parents are missing that or whatnot today, but.
And I always think there's an exception to every rule.
Yeah.
Because as I'm thinking about this and as I just said that, I'm like, and I also read the memoir by Dylan Klebold's mother, Sue Klebold. Did you ever read that?
Yes. That's so good.
And that breaks my heart because they, for all intents and purposes, from what you can tell and like from what she wrote about, and I tend to believe her because she seems like a very genuine, my heart goes out to her for what she went through. But for all intents and purposes, like, she was like, Dylan was a good kid and we did everything we could. And but I also think she does admit, like, in hindsight, she's like, yeah, there's things that I probably could have done better. You know what I mean? Like,
she's taken responsibility. I feel like the family has taken responsibility.
That's exactly the difference.
She's gone out and talked about it. She has fought for gun safety laws.
Gun safety and suicide prevention.
And I think she's unpacked that whole situation and thought about it. And she's compassionate. Like, she has high EQ from what I can tell from her books and her speaking engagements. Like,
I would agree
she
with
is
that.
Emotionally aware and she's not living in a delusion. And she's very connected with reality.
Yeah,
and the
I would very much
gravity
agree
of
with
the situation.
that. I totally agree with that. That's a good point. Yeah, because when I saw that, when I said that, like, everyone's responsible for their kids, I'm like, yeah, and in that situation, here's what I want to clarify is, like, you're never going to be able to catch every single red flag and act on it and prevent. However, for as much as you can, be in touch with your child, hold them accountable to, learning hard lessons and making mistakes. Like, love without accountability is just exposing them to, like, situations like that could get them into a lot of trouble. Yeah. You're not protecting them by, like, keeping them from learning hard lessons.
No, you can love them, but also recognize the responsibility that they played in a situation that you may have played too. I think that's what irritates people is after these big events happen and certain people or parents get very protective and they're like, they make excuses, right? They're making excuses for the behaviors. Other people are looking at it and say, why don't you just say, like, she was driving. She killed two innocent people. Yeah. We don't know what happened. None of us do. This is a very tragic situation. We're very sorry that our daughter happened to be the one driving that car at that moment.
Mm-hmm. Period.
I think that's what people are looking for is accountability. Like, just say, like, I'm sorry and I did it. I did it, or I wasn't there, but it's clear the evidence supports that, yes, she did drive this car. We can see that it didn't stop. We don't know why.
Yep.
But,
it's like, even when they had Mackenzie in the documentary, Mackenzie said something like, yes, I was there. Yes, I did it. It was not intentional. And it's like, you're in jail. Why do you need to keep just saying it's not intentional?
It happened.
Why do you, like, she's sorry to the families. It happened. Take accountability. Like, even the fact, and I know we got to wrap up here, but, like, even the fact that they were, like, then saying that she had POTS and they're like, for the defense. And it's like, no, stop. Just stop. I'd love to know, if there's any other cases that you want us to discuss from the psychology standpoint. This truly is just something that I have such a understanding about, especially when these family dynamics can be so toxic that lead to tragedies like this. If we can, inform people of how to look beyond it or get help for it, because it is tangly and messy, and breaking generational trauma is really hard and painful. but hopefully we shed some light on some important facts while also not sensationalizing something that was truly such a tragedy and took away two beautiful humans that just seem to be such lights on this earth. So thank you for listening.
Thanks,
We
everybody.
love you so much. We are on social media at Left Cry Club. Be safe out there. Take care of one another. Be a good human.
Take
Own your stuff.
responsibility.
Take responsibility. It's okay.
Say you're sorry.
Say you're sorry. I will end with this. If you have a hard time saying you're sorry, that's something to evaluate.
The end.
Okay,
See you
bye.
next time.